Lonely days are gone, I'm a going home. My baby just wrote me a letter.
The band The Box Tops, the city of Memphis, and pineapple on pizza. What do these three have in common? They are all criminally underrated by the public at large. And here at Do You Remember, we hold it to be our sacred duty to bring to light awesome things that people don't like enough. So here we go. I am Nostalgic Nick, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the most underrated bands of the 70s. Maybe these bands were massive back in the day, but have slowly faded from the cultural mind's eye.
Love is the drug I'm thinking of. Oh!
Maybe these bands were huge overseas, but just never cracked the US market. Or maybe these bands were critical darlings who never made it big for reasons beyond their control. I guess you're just gonna have to watch and find out. And if you do, please hit that thumbs up icon to show support. And subscribe to our channel for more musical deep dives like this. But now, let's take those old records off the shelf. Roxy Music. While music fans from the US might be surprised to see Roxy Music on this list, the band was incredibly popular across the pond during the 70s, just never managing to catch on stateside. Which is very surprising because they basically invented musically complicated glam rock. And inspired everyone from punk rockers to electronic new wavers. I mean, just listen to their first single, Virginia Plain. The song's opening guitar notes seem to come straight off of U2's Joshua Tree. While the pulsing synthesizer would be at home in any number of early 80s hits. And this was 1972, mind you, when groups as varied as Nile Rodgers, The Smiths, and the Sex Pistols all cite you as influences. And very few people have even heard of you today. Underrated is just scratching the surface. Bob Seger. I know, everyone's first thought when they hear the name Bob Seger these days, and that's of a young Tom Cruise, clad only in shirt, socks, and whitey-tidies, sliding into the living room like God's gift to women and men.
Just take those old records off the shelf.
And that's unfortunate, because it reduces the career of one of America's greatest rockers to that of a footnote in Cruise's fourth best film, and leaves him surprisingly underrated. Because Bob Seger is so much more than old-time rock and roll. The guy had a career that spanned decades. He has sold more than 75 million records. And although it took Seger a while to hit it big, he absolutely crushed the late 70s. I mean, take the songs Night Moves, Hollywood Nights, and Against the Wind. They were all released within 4 years of each other. And that's just naming a few of Seger's classics. So yeah, give the guy a little respect and put some pants on already, Tommy. T-Rex. And now, moving on from an American legend to yet another British band whose dinosauric 70s popularity and prolific influence on other musicians isn't as recognized today as much as it should be. I'm talking, of course, about rock gods T-Rex.
Well, my body says it's just like Robin Hood.
I mean, just check out this 1970 to 73 Beatle-esque run they had. 11 hits in the UK top 10, including 4 number ones, multiple smash records, and the list of bands that have stated T-Rex were major influences on them. The Ramones, Kate Bush, Joy Division, the Pixies, and R.E.M. With a resume that reads like that, you would expect T-Rex to be on the radio all the time. But alas, it is not so. Maybe it was founder and songwriter Mark Bolan's tragic early death in 1977. Or perhaps they just didn't enter the zeitgeist in the US as deeply as the UK. But whatever the reason, we all need to bang on a gong a lot more often. Deep Purple. Quick, everyone, name the 3 UK bands that helped create heavy metal and were collectively known as the unholy trinity of British hard rock. Led Zeppelin, good. And Black Sabbath, of course. Now, what's the last one? Are you struggling a bit? Well, that's a shame, because Deep Purple definitely deserves more than a footnote in history. Initially formed as a psychedelic act in the late 60s, Deep Purple soon abandoned that hippy-dippy stuff and began to rock hard. Like, really, really hard. So hard that in 1975, the Guinness Book of World Records named them the world's loudest band. And apparently the people loved the change, because the band has sold a staggering 100 million albums worldwide to date. Today they're known primarily for the admittedly awesome song Smoke on the Water. But Deep Purple certainly merits a deeper dive into their vast catalog. Blondie. Imagine for a second being Blondie, cutting your teeth in the most famous punk and new wave club of all time, New York's CBGB, achieving worldwide fame, and still only being the fourth most critically lauded group to emerge from that glorious cesspool, that mecca of counterculture. It makes a little more sense when you realize they were playing gigs with the Ramones, the Talking Heads, and Patti Smith. But still, it's gotta hurt. And Blondie were by no means slouches. David Bowie himself heard that first album, a record that showed remarkable nimbleness in being able to shift from fast-paced punk to power ballads instantly, and he invited them to open for him on a nationwide tour. Blondie went on to have a varied musical career, eventually incorporating punk, new wave, reggae, disco, and rap. But somehow they are still underrated today. Foreigner. As we've discussed, there are many ways to be underrated, and British band Foreigner certainly checks one of these major boxes. But wait, you say, I know them. I've heard at least a couple of their songs. Yeah, sure, but unless you rate them as the most popular, if not best bands from the late 70s, then I'm sorry, Foreigner still are underrated. I mean, check it, their first 4 albums, starting with 1977's appropriately named Foreigner, each sold more than 5 million copies. I mean, that's astounding. And if you played their top 8 or 9 songs on Spotify, I can guarantee you'd be humming along to every one. Simply, they absolutely dominated both the charts and the airwaves for half a decade. And yet, today, they are lumped in with such contemporaries as Kansas and Styx. Seriously, people today have forgotten how popular Foreigner once was, which means certainly underrated. Big Star. And now we pivot to a band underrated because they never became nearly popular enough. I mean, Rolling Stone magazine put it best. They had a, quote, seminal body of work that never stopped inspiring succeeding generations as the quintessential American power pop band, and one of the most mythic and influential cult acts in all of rock and roll. And yet, have you ever heard of Memphis's Big Star? I thought not. But in an alternate universe, you most certainly would have. From their very first album, 1972's #1 album, Big Star were critical darlings, but unfortunately, the band's record company, Stax, was for some reason unable to market or promote the album, and the great record got virtually no airplay. Well, the same exact thing happened with their second album, Radio City, and their third album, Third, also beloved now, was shelved for 4 years for being not commercial enough. And so we're left with a bizarro world where one of the most critically respected bands of the 1970s is now best known for writing the theme song to That 70s Show.
The same old thing we did last week.
Jimmy Cliff. When talking about reggae, we often forget about the man who first broke out of Jamaica and brought the genre to the world. And that man is, of course, the indelible Jimmy Cliff. Cliff's second album, Wonderful World, Beautiful People, started to introduce the world to the star and contained the single Vietnam, which none other than Bob Dylan called the best protest song he had ever heard. But it was the soundtrack to the 1972 movie The Harder They Come that really made Jimmy Cliff an international star. The album, a compilation with other incredible reggae stars, truly showcased Cliff's range, from the upbeat, good time vibes of You Can Get It If You Really Want, to the sweet, slow love of Many Rivers to Cross.
Many rivers I've crossed.
I mean, seriously, please check Jimmy Cliff out and give him the credit he is due as one of reggae's founding fathers. Boston. A band that was one of the biggest 70s arena rock bands, fronted by a literal genius who attended MIT and built all their recording equipment from scratch, and had the second highest selling debut album of all time at 17 million copies. And still, we don't talk about Boston as much as we should. Sure, we've all heard More Than a Feeling grace our airwaves on occasion. But Boston is so much more than that, with a fantastic first 3 albums that took 8 years to release due to the perfectionist tendencies of the band leader Tom Schultz. These mass heads really deserve a deeper dive, and I think we can give it to them now. There you have them, some of the most underrated bands of the 1970s. So, which of these classic groups did you absolutely love? Are there any that you had never heard of? Did we miss any critically underappreciated 70s bands? Please let us know in the comments below, we read them all. And before you go, please hit that thumbs up icon to show support. And subscribe to our channel for more content like this. But from all of us here at Do You Remember, we want to thank you for watching.